Hey everyone, in this Research Like a Pro question and answer video, we're talking about avoiding plagiarism in genealogical writing. And I'm going to discuss plagiarism and the difference between that and infringing on copyright. And then we'll talk about using a public domain book, a county history, and how we can use that in our research report while quoting it appropriately, citing it so that we can avoid plagiarism. So each month in office hours, we focus on a different lesson from the course and just give a quick tip from that topic. So this month, the tip is coming from our lesson about copyright, proofs, and publication, which is after the research report. And so for those of you who are new, this might be something to just kind of take in and look forward to doing after you finish writing a report, and keep in mind some of the things you can do at the end and kind of focusing on that. So the tip that I wanted to give is about plagiarism and copyright. And so first I'm just going to talk about definitions of each one and then how to avoid them. So for plagiarism, of course, we do want to avoid doing that, because the definition of that is passing off writing that is not your own. And I deliberately didn't put um, other people's writing here because I divided that out into writing done by machines or bots and then actual people's writing. And I think we do need to differentiate those two things. But still, I wouldn't want to plagiarize the AI by not quoting it or disclosing it. Because in essence, if we do try to pass off either of these types of writing as our own, it's still passing off writing that isn't your own, and it's unethical, and we shouldn't do that. We don't want to try to disguise someone else's or something else's writing that we didn't do. It's not honest to our reader. And so I think sometimes this happens unintentionally, even. And so sometimes it's challenging to know how to avoid that. And sometimes the easiest way to avoid it is just to quote it exactly. And often that's the route that I'll take, especially in a research report. And so you can avoid this by putting quotation marks around the exact text that you're taking from. Or if it's a longer paragraph quote, just use an indented block quote. And then always credit your sources with citations. Even if you're not using an exact quote, but you're paraphrasing it, you can still use a footnote citation with the source credited in the footnotes there. All right, so now copyright. So infringing on copyright would be publishing someone without the permission from the copyright holder. And so we don't want to do that either. And so to understand this definition, we need to understand what publishing is, and that's making something available to the public by posting it online or putting it into a report that will be distributed to the public, or a family history book that will be distributed to the public. And then how do we know if we're distributing it to the public? Well, if you're just giving it to your one cousin, that doesn't count as being public. But if you're making it available to any of your cousins that contact you and that want a copy and you're providing that to them, then you're making that public. And this is a definition that was really interesting to learn about from Tom Jones in his institute course over the summer that I took about mastering genealogical documentation. And he really spent a while, just a whole lecture, talking about publishing and what makes something published. And it was really eye-opening to consider that and to think about, when are we publishing? I think the most common thing that we would do as genealogists is post something online on our tree or in our website that we've written, or that, a blog post or some kind of biography that we've written. So it's good to consider that that is publishing. Even though we're not a formal publisher, we are putting something online that's available to the public. So when we're doing that, we need to be aware of things that are in copyright or in the public domain. Public domain materials simply means published material that is not covered by copyright in the, whatever jurisdiction you live in. So if you're in the United States, there's a certain copyright law, and there's a certain amount of time that you can republish material after that has passed. So public domain materials are great for genealogists because we don't have to worry as much about, are we allowed to use this, because they can be freely used and republished. So how do we avoid publishing copyrighted materials when we shouldn't? Well, we need to really understand the source and to learn about the year the item was created, then learn who the creator was. And so usually the creator or their heirs are the copyright holders. And then if we want to put that in a publication we're doing and it's under copyright, we can ask permission from the copyright holder. And if we have a hard time getting that or doing this, or we don't want to do this, we can simply try to find and use items in the public domain if we can. And there are actually a lot of things in the public domain which we can use. And this is wonderful because anything created by the federal government in the United States is not under copyright. It's in the public domain and we can use. And after a while, things go in the public domain too. So here's an example of a book that's in the public domain. So this is published in 1882. And so the requisite amount of time has passed. And the title of this is The History of Houston County in Minnesota. And this is available in full on Google Books. And so let's say that I'm writing a biography about my ancestor who lived here. And I go to this description of Spring Grove Township. And reading this, I just think this is such a good description of the town. And I want to use a lot of these words in my report. So we've already avoided copyright by finding a public domain book. Now, can I go ahead and just use this writing as if it's my own? So, of course, no, because that would be plagiarizing, passing off someone else's writing as our own. So, we still would want to read this and then rephrase it in our own words and give credit to it. One thing that we would want to avoid doing is reading this and then using a lot of the same exact wording and then not crediting it. That would be plagiarism. So, here's an example of how I would use this in my report. So, the town was first organized when first organized was much larger than it is now, taking in a part of what has since been organized into Black Hammer. So it kind of talks about how Spring Grove and Black Hammer were part together. So if I don't know how to make this into my own words or whatever, I can just do a block quote. So that's what I opted to do in this situation. So George Smith was from Spring Grove Township in Houston County, which was described in the following way in the history of Houston County. And then I just copied and pasted that whole thing, and the OCR didn't quite get that right, but then a footnote giving credit to my source. So here's the source here. And now anyone reading this can clearly see this is not my own writing. This is from the book. So hopefully that example gave you some ideas for how we can avoid infringing copyright and also avoiding plagiarism. And I think it's just safe to say that the best way to avoid plagiarism is to always credit your sources, whether you paraphrase what was said, use a quote, or even use a block quote. We always, in each of those situations, we still need to provide credit to the author who wrote that information.